Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's National CyberWatch Center webcast. As a courtesy to others, we would like to ask that you keep your microphone muted during the presentation. If you are using your phone for the audio connection, you can press *6 to mute and unmute. Today's webcast is titled Challenges for Medical Cybersecurity, Understanding the Current Crisis, Emergent Technologies, and Developing Risk Management Strategies that reward getting it right. Your presenter today is Dr. Owen McNally. Dr. McNally is a technology analyst and researcher in Austin, Texas. A continuing theme in his work over recent decades is the analysis and evaluation of technology based on humanistic principles. After completing undergraduate studies in psychology at the University of Dallas, he turned in the 1990s to studying cognitive science, neuroscience, artificial intelligence, the pre-World Wide Web internet, and cyberpunk culture. He completed graduate work in psychology at Duquesne University, then joined a series of software development teams to evaluate products for usability and quality assurance. He subsequently earned an interdisciplinary PhD at the University of Texas at Austin, with a program of work in medical cognitive science, and has taught college-level software design, cognitive studies, psychology, human growth and development, research methods, and statistics for the behavioral sciences. In recent years, his work has been in the areas of cybersecurity, medical technology, logistics, renewable energy, artificial intelligence, neurotech, executive dashboards, evaluating startups, and research for investors. Owen, that was a mouthful. Thanks for joining us today.
Appreciate that. Well, I am the bearer of bad tidings. Just to let everybody know, I have a fairly pessimistic worldview on the situation with medical cybersecurity. And the reasons for this, I think, can be summed up fairly quickly here. The situation seems to me to be basically deteriorating. And if it is the case that anyone's got some contrary views on that, I would love to hear them. Please do reach out for me if you have a better narrative or some evidence that doesn't fit in with this understanding, but I may be too immersed in it to have anything like a really objective grasp of the situation because I see so much bad news. In fact, just yesterday it was announced that 2.6 million personal healthcare records were quite possibly hacked. This was a healthcare system called Anthem, working with one of their vendors, made this announcement. There's been lots of bad news about ransomware, about hospitals becoming victims to phishing attacks. And I think that at this point, the world of cyber criminals regards the healthcare system as a big fat target. The American healthcare system and elsewhere around the world. I doubt that there's anybody listening to this broadcast who would make the claim that actually things are getting better. I would love to hear about this. I do think, in fact, that there is some evidence that the seriousness of the situation is getting attention from key executives in the healthcare system, some key people within information security, and U.S. and other governmental decision makers. So it may be that what I'm reporting to you today is substantially bad news from 2016, 2017, and 2018, and that actually we're more or less at the bottom and things will be getting better henceforth. I don't believe this is true, but maybe so. So here's just a few major points that I want to make here. I think that innovation in what in software development is called sandboxing is really on the side of the bad actors. It's been some years now since people in the information security community made the public aware of the shift from the old idea we had of hackers as being, you know, adolescents who were mischievous but not malicious, and lone wolves who were exploring and this kind of thing. It's fairly well known at this point, and I think there's robust public awareness that there are sophisticated criminal cartels behind some of the most prominent and dangerous breaches of security. And it's also the case that that there's state actors are quite possibly involved with some of these criminal gangs at this point. So it's, I think, clear to quite a few of us that information security professionals are playing defense. The innovation is on the side of the bad actors. They're sandboxing, they're innovating, they're sharing ideas. With information security is reacting. Information security is having to patch and look at Microsoft security updates once a month and respond to a tempo of operations that, to use a military concept, favors the enemy. Now, maybe that will change, and maybe there are some technologies and organizational and behavioral shifts that can turn this around, and I'm going to make a case for artificial intelligence and machine learning as being technologies that the United States, having developed, presents an opportunity to take the fight to the enemy, as it were. We'll see if that's true. In general, I think the situation is pretty bad. It may be that we're in the end of the era where the really bad stuff is prominent in our awareness. I think that we're going to probably go through a bad 2019. There has not been quite as much ransomware activity in the end of 2018. But we'll see. I think 2019 is going to be a pivotal period for people in this space. So what I'm going to emphasize some metrics that tell a fairly bleak story, or I will tell a bleak story with these metrics. Then I'm going to spend some time looking at some remedies and solutions. I will spend more time in the first category. I know it better, and I'm not very optimistic. But there are some things that can be done. We don't want any people to panic. If you are yourself working in the healthcare world, or if you have close associates that are, there's some things that you can do that are relatively low-hanging fruit that could address the situation, which I think is a crisis at this point. And there's some technologies that are going to be worth looking at that may present game-changing promise and may eventually even allow us to put the bad actors on the defensive. But there's lots of choices about the different technological and organizational remedies. There's really too many choices and not enough time and not enough money. It's a question of which ones get emphasized, which ones get the resources and the buy-in from management and buy-in from boards of directors. Let me make one other kind of large point here. One of the things that I think will quite possibly support getting adequate resources into this space is the entrance of people from the insurance world, actuaries, and risk management. There's a series of high-profile companies with long histories in risk management and insurance that are now moving into various verticals in the cybersecurity space. I think that's actually encouraging because the lack of resources has held back healthcare cybersecurity. It's been under-resourced, and I don't think that will continue to be the case if insurance policies are higher than they would otherwise need to be. In other words, if key people in hospitals make the decision to invest in particular areas of cybersecurity, I think that the actuaries will reflect this. The risk management profile and the risk management models should accommodate this information, and price points should be registered accordingly. Now that's I think not true in 2018 just yet. I think it's just starting to be true. And I think in 2019 and 2020, you should see much more activity, and hopefully companies that are investing in training and investing in staffing and technological remedies and organizational shifts, hopefully those companies are going to be rewarded by better price points for their cyber risk insurance. So let me start off here with just a description a friend has given me, a guy who's working with a neurology team at a hospital that's, I'll just say, is one of the major hospital conglomerates. And he has a very hard time getting any work done. So you can see his cry from the heart here. He describes the situation as catastrophic. He says that cloud platforms are practically not available. The current practice in hospitals, you know, from his point of view, is one that does not make it easier to work. If anything, it makes it harder to get your job done. And I think this kind of thing contributes to burnout among physicians. And I'm going to come back to that particular point as an important one. The point of medicine is not, cyber medicine is to take care of people, to take care of people when they present illnesses and maybe even prevent them from getting sick in the first place. That's why doctors go to medical school. It's not to do cybersecurity or get trained in cybersecurity. But the situation where it's harder for clinical professionals to get their jobs done because of quote unquote cyber paranoia, this is one where those of us who are in the information security world, we need to step up our game and help the healthcare world move past this current era and to support the primary purpose of clinical medicine, clinical professionals, which is to help people and to only deal with systems as much as absolutely possible. So this is, of course, an anecdote, or what some people might call anecdata. This is one person's story. It's not the entire world of, you know, healthcare or anything like this, but it's a telling one. So let me go through a few key points, and I'm going to emphasize some core metrics that I think would reinforce my description of the current situation as actually being pretty bad. I don't think the word crisis is too strong. Maybe it is too strong. So last year was a particularly nasty ransomware attack. Some of you may have heard of this, called Wannacry. I mention this one because it quite possibly, I think it quite possibly was on the verge of seeing loss of life, because you had people in ambulances who were en route to surgical procedures who actually were diverted from the facilities that they were scheduled to go to and had to go elsewhere because of how many internal hospital systems were compromised through the ransomware attack. Once the hospital recognized what the situation was, they did get the word out to emergency responders, to other healthcare professionals, and they, you know, responded with a crisis regime, which they are trained to do. They have emergency response. Hospitals and healthcare systems do have protocols for dealing with, you know, all kinds of different emergencies, and they managed to route the patients. And as far as I know, there was no loss of life. This was a very, very scary situation that developed. Surgeries within minutes of starting had to be canceled. I mean, you know, that may have actually negatively impacted any number of patients' health. I just don't know if there's any direct evidence of this right now. It would strike me as maybe being that the UK healthcare system dodged a bullet. I think something on the order of 200,000 computers in many different countries were compromised by this. And I've seen one analysis to the effect that it was about maybe $4 billion in losses and damages and expenses that were accrued from this. So this is, I think, the worst one to date. We can only hope and maybe prepare. So it is the worst one. We don't actually have a situation where anybody dies. My sense is we're very, very close to that point. 2019, I think, will be the tipping point. So I think that the seriousness of the situation has been registering in the minds of executives and board of directors and other key decision makers for a couple of years now. Certainly the Wannacry Ransomware incident, that got people's attention. And I'm seeing some evidence now that executives are describing cybersecurity as being one of their main priorities right now. I think that's more true for the larger healthcare systems. The key point here is that healthcare represents a continuum from large corporations with many, many hospitals, there are billions of dollars, to relatively small medical practices, with maybe 3 dentists somewhere. Now, many of those smaller practices have been bought up by the larger ones, and the larger ones have been consolidated into the giants. There's a process of consolidation for various reasons. But the overall situation, while getting recognition from key decision makers and executives and the board of directors, it's still the case that some of the smaller medical practices and rural healthcare facilities are very much playing catch up. I think some of them have not gotten the message yet. They don't feel that they're targets, and we'll see whether their lack of preparation results in some very dangerous business in 2019 and 2020. Maybe they will escape the danger through just luck. We'll see. So one point that is often made when you're describing why healthcare systems are such an attractive target for the bad actors, the simplest answer is the value of personal health information and exfiltrated electronic health records on the so-called dark web. It's worth quite a lot of money. If you get your credit card information compromised, hopefully you figure this out and you get that canceled. But your personal health information can have your home address, your home phone number, date of birth, all types of other personal health or personal information that can be used for multiple purposes. And people who are involved in the identity fraud business find personal health information of the highest value. That's not going to change anytime soon. That's probably going to be with us for the foreseeable future. And I think there's every reason to think that personal health information, once exfiltrated, will command some of the highest money of any type of information that's on the dark web. Some of the estimates you see that it can be, up to 10 or 20 times as much compared to credit card data. Some numbers I've seen, Forbes was reporting that your personal health information could be worth up to $1,000 on the dark web. Other estimates I've seen $400 roughly per leaked record. And I think a point that needs to be emphasized is that while the incentives at this point are primarily monetary, the introduction of state actors into this space could mean that there's other incentives for these criminal gangs and criminal cartels to get people's personal information. So personal health information has all kinds of very sensitive information about people's lives, some of which could be politically embarrassing, some of which could be useful for blackmail purposes, or presents opportunities for leverage for political reasons and for reasons beyond just pure profit in the narrow sense. So I said I was going to be the bearer of bad tidings, and I think that's unfortunately going to be the case. I will have some other points to make as well. It's not all bad. It's just substantially bad. So what are some surveys reporting about what executives think about their medical devices? Medical devices in hospitals have gotten quite a lot of attention in the last couple of years. A talk I went to at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, Austin, really woke me up to the lack of adequate security in the devices as they are introduced into hospital settings. Medical device manufacturers have a lot on their plate. It's very easy within technology development for security to be something that is maybe done late in the game and maybe given inadequate resources compared to the seriousness of the system once deployed in the real world. I think many medical device manufacturers have had an implicit or even explicit attitude that it's hospital IT's problem once that device has been installed in a healthcare setting. Well, the hospital IT staff has already got too many things going on, and they may prefer that the manufacturers have done adequate quality assurance testing and security tests. Well, hopefully is not good enough at this point. We really need to do better than that. I have not heard of anyone's health being compromised yet. I've not heard of anybody dying or anything like this because of an insulin pump being hacked. I would predict it's just a matter of time. I hate to put it this way, but it's probably going to happen in the next year or two, because so many Internet of Things type devices now are in hospitals. So one estimate I'm seeing from the KLAS survey was estimating that according to executives and CIOs and so forth at hospitals, that they estimated about 10,000 connected devices per organization, and maybe 60% lacked confidence in the security of those medical devices. Another sobering perspective on healthcare cybersecurity, that some of the hospitals are actually paying the ransomware. I do not know how many just yet. I would love it if anyone out there has got some hard data on what the estimates are about the percentage of organizations who have been infected with ransomware that paid it off. I don't think anybody really knows, but I'd love to get an estimate if there is one. There's been at least one very high-profile example of the Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center last year, or I'm sorry, in 2016, paying $17K to the criminals. This incentivizes their further bad behavior, of course. And the Kansas Heart Hospital was reported this year to have paid the ransom, only to have the bad guys make a request for a second payment. So just because you pay them doesn't mean that they're going to actually release your data. Hopefully they will, and in some cases it appears that they have done so, but not necessarily the case. So there's has not been as much ransomware in the last few months, ransomware attacks as maybe I was afraid of, but there's been some bad news in the last couple of years. So I'll just mention a few more things about the seriousness of the situation that we're in right now. IBM has partnered with the Ponemon Institute for a couple of years now, and there's a claim there that healthcare organizations lead other sectors in costs of data breaches, and that it seems to be going up over the last few years, which is evidence that the situation is not just very serious, but has actually gotten worse in 2015, 2016, 2017, and this year. Now, there's an ethical dilemma here that I have to bring up that I've alluded to earlier, and I do not actually know what the solution is to this. I'd be curious if anybody has some wise thoughts on this, but I'll bring it to your attention. Sometimes you encounter the idea that cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility now. Certainly, we don't think it should just be IT's responsibility only. We want to have as many people in organizations in general, and healthcare in particular, be aware of the risks. So it's mandatory in many organizations now to have cybersecurity training. HR will send you some training modules, and this hopefully gets people's awareness up, makes it less likely that they do something like click on an email attachment that says payment notification that turns out to be some type of phishing expedition and with a malware risk vector at that point. That's one of the most common ways that malware will infect hospitals. It's just something as simple as an email with a payment received or invoice or that kind of subject line. So we do want everybody to be aware of the risks, but let me push back on this idea even while I'm mentioning its value. Doctors and other healthcare people are there for other reasons. There's probably some absolute minimum of awareness and training that they are required to have. How much is going to be a prudential judgment, but there's been, I think, some evidence of burnout among physicians. They go to medical school, want to treat people, and they end up spending their time increasingly dealing with systems, dealing with meetings, dealing with emails, dealing with their devices that they're staring at rather than engaging with people. They're dealing with change management and technology and risk management. And then cybersecurity training is yet one more aspect of their day jobs that I don't think many of them enjoy. They go do it if they have to, and I think they get why it's important. But I think that there's a real ethical conundrum in asking physicians and nurses and other healthcare professionals to spend more time than they already are on meetings and training and technology and systems and compliance and risk management. That can eat up more and more of their day. Then they have smaller and smaller chunks of time to actually interact with their patients in a hands-on way. This is part of why doctors may interact with people for 10 or 15 minutes and just write them a prescription as quickly as possible, because they just don't have the time because of how many patients they have to see that day and all the other responsibilities they have. Now, one possible way out of this, I think, would be for the continuing medical education requirement that doctors and nurses and other licensed healthcare professionals have to maintain, for that to be a cybersecurity component. And I am seeing some evidence that this is being offered. So this would be a way to satisfy the need to get them trained, as well as their need to get continuing medical education credits to maintain their license every year. So I'd say a key issue here with cybersecurity in healthcare is just the lack of staff, the need for training, the need for upskilling the existing IT staff, maybe upskilling many more people besides IT in understanding information security. So there's just not enough people to do cybersecurity. There's a backlog of folks. We need to infill positions in hospitals. There's just not enough trained workers. And I can tell you from some research I've been doing for the National CyberWatch Center, there's not enough trainers, and there's not really a very ready solution in the near term to getting more trainers either. So we're going to be, I think, quite possibly dealing with a lack of trained cybersecurity workers and trainers for certainly the immediate term and in the short term. So there's some evidence from the medical device manufacturer Abbott that commissioned a study with the Chertoff group that many of the administrators feel underprepared and that they need more staffing and more training. So I think to wrap up this point here, I do think there's evidence the situation has gotten worse. It could be that it hasn't really gotten worse. That's the null hypothesis here. The situation hasn't really gotten worse, and I'm just more aware of it. That could be true. I don't think it is. Please send me some evidence to the contrary. I don't want to get locked into this pessimistic view. So let's look briefly at what I think is the highest quality report that came out this year about cybersecurity in healthcare. It was done by the Marshall and McLennan companies. It's a very high quality and well-resourced and long report. I recommend it to you that you get it. Among their points, healthcare is among the industries most vulnerable to cyber attacks. There have been high-profile attacks in the past few years, more of them. The sector will likely remain one of the most targeted given its sensitive data. Business interruptions and leak of customer information are the most critical cyber loss scenarios for healthcare. And breaches can have major implications beyond just financial losses. can result in operational shutdowns. There is a shift in thinking now that healthcare cybersecurity is not just about protecting patients' health information or personal health information. As important as that is, and it is of the highest importance, as I've been mentioning, I think the Wannacry Ransomware attack last year was a wake-up call where there's a potential for a much worse situation than people having their personal health records being sold on the dark web. You could actually have people dying because they can't get surgeries in hospitals. So the health care industry incurs one of the highest financial costs. In healthcare, it looks like internal threats actually are a substantial threat vector. I think we're talking about malicious employees or maybe disgruntled employees, that kind of thing. And some quotation here was that more than 70% of the respondents, they had, I think, about 108 senior level healthcare executives in this survey, with maybe more than 1,000 in total. About more than 70% of these respondents expected a cyber breach could cost them more than $1 million per incident. And they're mentioning that healthcare is particularly vulnerable, and this is more than what financial institutions and some other sectors are dealing with. So there's many options and there's not enough time and money. What to do? Well, there's a lot of things you could do. You could try to ramp up staff. That's not that easy to do because there's not enough trained workers. You could spend more time upskilling and retraining your existing IT staff. That sounds good. It's not that easy to get trainers, though there's more options available now. You could try to make contracts with teams that just are not going to be full-time on-site employees, and you get a good relationship going with people off-site, and you make up for the lack of full-time on-site employees that way. That seems like a reasonable option. You could do deep audits of medical devices. There's the possibility of investing in threat intelligence. You could spend way more time on HIPAA compliance, getting more people trained to be more sophisticated about HIPAA. You could adopt the National Institute of Standards and Technology's cybersecurity framework adoption. That's actually becoming more popular, and I think it has quite a lot to recommend it, but it's very process intensive and it's going to take quite a lot of time and a lot of buy-in. There's doing drills and emergency simulations, which hospitals have to do some of the time, but you could do specific ones about cybersecurity incidents like ransomware. There's next generation firewalls, there's network segmentation, there's encryption of data on networks, there's all kinds of R&D possibilities, software-defined networking. So, what can be done? Of the different options I've seen, if I had to pick one that I think probably works for organizations at different levels of size and different budgets and so forth, I would probably pick this one, which you would call the default deny and the whitelisting regime. As if we're going to do one thing and do it right, get the buy-in and spend the money and deal with the grief getting this stuff done, I would maybe pick this one. Some of the hospitals, of course, already have this. It's old hat to them. What we mean by default deny is that the IT administrators and network administrators and security has a regime where applications have to be given permission to access data, especially data that's outside of the intranet. So getting anything on the web has to be, you have to have like a white list of applications that would enjoy those permissions. But the default is for traffic not to be able to interact with people who are inside the firewalls or inside the perimeter. So the default is deny access. So you're not trying to patch furiously and you're not trying to catch up with the new threats. You're trying instead to deal with the grief and hand-holding and logistics associated with the whitelisting process. Getting that going, I think, is fairly non-trivial in terms of resources and the difficulties and just the lack of usability. I think it's a problem for people who go to work and they are constantly dealing with the need to get information from the internet, and then they have to get that application whitelisted. It's not easy getting this set up. I would not want to mislead anybody. This is not a silver bullet. It's not for anyone. It's not for everyone, I should say. But I think if you had to maybe emphasize one technological and organizational fix that would maybe get you a lot of resilience, I'd probably go there first if you've done a lot of the other things right. Now, let me just mention a couple different technologies that I think would potentially support changing the game such that the security professionals are not always playing catch up, always playing defense, always reacting to the innovation of the bad actors. I don't think this is going to happen in the immediate or short term, but I think, say, by early to middle next decade, we could see some improvements based on the operational advantages that the United States has in the areas of artificial intelligence and what is called machine learning. So the seriousness of the situation has gotten attention from key decision makers in the US government, the US military, as well as the business sector, as well as healthcare and many other sectors. It's known at this point. And the US government, to a large extent, paid for the development of the technology that we call artificial intelligence. It comes from American academics and scientists and government researchers. Later, this is in the 1950s when it was pioneered, and then in the 60s, 70s, and later other countries, including the United Kingdom and France, and some others have also gotten into this game in a big way, Japan and China later. But artificial intelligence is an extremely knowledge-intensive branch of computer science. It has many people with PhDs and universities who do the teaching and training. It's not something that lends itself to the activities of criminal cartels. There's a lot of very smart people on the cybercrime side and among the bad actor hackers. They're very, very smart and clever. They adapt tools readily. The set of technologies that we call artificial intelligence, they just do not lend themselves to this kind of quick adoption and adaption and transformation. It's the kind of technology that has been developed in universities by people with PhDs. It takes a long time to understand the nature of the domain. It's just very, very knowledge intensive. So I think that the United States has an advantage here if that advantage can be leveraged. So machine learning is sometimes categorized as a branch of artificial intelligence. It's also considered to just overlap with it in some respects. There's been a lot of investment and excitement in this space in the last few years. A lot of talent is moving into machine learning. And there's some real-world examples of software for prediction of crime that's been used now for quite some years. So the CompStat system, I believe, was originally deployed in New York City, and they've been iterating it and improving it, making it better. It seems to serve to predict certain types of crime reasonably well, and it's been argued that part of why New York City has had lower crime in the last, say, 15 years has been the adoption of the CompStat system. So I think that's a real-world example of predictive analytics. I think predictive analytics and machine learning quite possibly present opportunities for prediction of hacking incidents and other ways of maybe putting the bad guys on the defensive, because you can have statistical models anticipating maybe when they're going to act. I don't think we've got anything right now that a hospital could deploy that is going to keep it from being hacked this year, but I think that there are technologies that are being integrated into healthcare systems in the predictive analytics space for cybersecurity that's going to see some, maybe some payoff in 2019, 2020. So I will mention just in passing a technology that has gotten quite a lot of attention. There's a lot of hype around it. It's the blockchain. I think it's worth being aware of in 2019, especially because of how much investment is moving into this space. It's basically just a database with encryption. But there's reasons to think that the way it's architected is such that the information or data in it is immutable, cannot be changed. There's very good reasons to think this is so. That presents a significant value add, and there's a lot of applications that you can build on this. Now, I had seen a proof of concept in a hospital setting by an individual and his team who I personally am very impressed with. There's a guy named John Halamka who I've been following for some years now, who's a working physician in a hospital, I think in Boston. And he and his team have deployed a blockchain-based system for sharing medical information across different electronic health record systems. So it would keep it secure and support it sharing. They've actually gotten the thing up and running. It's called MedRec. It's a proof of concept. It may or may not be of any use to hospitals in the future, but I would just say watch this space. There's a lot going on. So the last section here, I'm going to mention some innovations that are happening in the area of insurance, cyber risk management, and so forth. So I'm not normally that excited when there's more insurance overhead in the world of healthcare. In my opinion, this is part of why the United States gets less return on investment per dollar spent in the healthcare system than some of the peer countries, such as Canada and the United Kingdom and France. It's the insurance overhead that we're paying substantially for. I think that is part of the kind of problems with just healthcare finance. However, in the case of cybersecurity and cybersecurity risk management for hospitals, I'm actually encouraged to see a number of companies stepping up, some of which are veteran companies in the insurance and risk management space. What I think the real benefit here that's provided, at least potentially, is that resources should be better allocated based on how the price of insurance and the policies and risk management change. So it's commonly asserted within healthcare cybersecurity that there's underinvestment. I think in the case of staffing and training, you can make that case fairly well. As the insurance companies and risk management companies and underwriters and actuaries get involved, they can look at particular aspects of healthcare cybersecurity and see the return on investment for doing it right, for getting adequate staff, for doing training, for doing audits, for deploying appropriate technologies. And I think that the models are going to support a much more sophisticated and more robust inference from spending or lack of spending in particular areas of cybersecurity to the risk and the probability of monetary costs associated with that, with those risks. So some of the companies involved, AIG is one that's well known. They're moving into this space. I'm seeing Moody's and I think maybe Standard & Poor's, S&Ps now are going to be factoring cyber risk into their ratings for companies. There's a company called Fair Isaac Company or FICO that has the FICO score. I believe they're offering a product now to give a credit score type rating for cybersecurity. You're seeing more companies take out premiums in the cybersecurity space. I'm sorry, the cybersecurity insurance space. And you're seeing in healthcare and hospital systems now, there's an adoption of this branch of risk management where you buy cyber insurance. And I should also point out there is a growth of what's called the reinsurance market. So there's a lot of companies, I think many of whom are based in Bermuda, that do reinsurance. The insurance companies get a policy with the secondary reinsurance companies. And I think now that's happening with cybersecurity as well. So basically, the advantages this produces or presents, I think especially ones where you could have your partners and business associates or vendors rated, because that's one of the risk vectors here. An organization may do everything right or do many things right, but if their vendors or partners or third-party groups that they're outsourcing work to do not have adequate cybersecurity controls or protections, then you've got a risk vector. But if something like a credit score for those vendors and these other companies, I think that can allow you to manage your own risk better. And that's interesting. So I think we should see in 2019 and 2020 some new products being offered in this space. And stay tuned on this. I think it's promising, but I think the take-home message is that it should support more appropriate investments in areas of cybersecurity that have, up to this point, not gotten adequate investment. So that's basically what I have to say for today. I think the situation has gotten worse. Innovation's on the side of the bad actors. And I think of the different technological solutions, default, deny, or whitelisting are important and maybe provide the most value, but they're not easy to implement. I think artificial intelligence and machine learning may eventually provide a way for the United States and partners to get some advantage over the cycles of innovation which are currently enjoyed by the bad actors, in my opinion. And again, to reiterate the last point I made about cyber insurance, I think that the entrance of companies in the cyber risk management space and credit score type products for cybersecurity risk, I think could allow healthcare organizations to become better able to manage their own risk and then hopefully provide resources as needed for some of the different areas of hospital cybersecurity. So I'll just mention a couple other things here, some resources. So we're in the planning phase of offering healthcare cybersecurity training boot camps or workshops as part of the National CyberWatch Cybersecurity Skills Development Workshops. Early to mid 2019. Contact us if interested. You can get me at neuronoid@rocketmail.com, or you can get the executive director of the National CyberWatch Center, Casey O'Brien. Either of us, email us if you're interested in collaborating on this or getting people trained in this area. And then a couple websites that you may find of interest. One of my go-to sites is healthitsecurity.com. Always interesting stuff there. Good summaries of situations and news and what have you, and you can get access to white papers through them. I also have a site up. My site is medicalcybersecurity.com, which you can see listed there at the bottom. And you'll get more of my worldview, mostly pessimistic, if you want to go there. So that's all I have to say, but I am curious if anyone's got any questions.
So leave that slide up for just a second, Owen. One thing I want to point out there on the National CyberWatch email address takes center off the nationalcyberwatch.org and not National CyberWatch Center. So C. O'Brien at nationalcyberwatch.org.
Okay, thank you for that.
Not a problem. Just didn't want it to disappear out in the cyberland someplace. So
take center off there. I can do that right here.
There you go. You're the man. Thank you.
Okay. No, you the man.
So a couple of things, just to give folks time if they want to ask a question, please put it in the and type it into chat and send it to everyone, and then we'll pull from that. But just to give you some time to do that, I had a couple of leading questions here that I wanted to start with. First off, I noticed Shanta Stevens posted a comment in chat talking about Amazon's role in providing some type of platform for sharing electronic records. So, along with that, Owen, what's your opinion as far as having a single uniform medical record data system someplace that everyone, all healthcare providers use. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Is it something that may be more secure as opposed to having the magnitude of healthcare data systems we have out there now? What do you think?
One ring to bind them all, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, I think that there's a very good probability that Amazon and its partners are going to crack the nut of the problem right now where people's health information is scattered across different systems and different vendors and different platforms. The federal government has not been able to do this, even though many SAGAN's worth of money has been spent. SAGAN's, as you may know, is the units of billions and billions. I really think that the private sector and a commercial behemoth like Amazon is they've got the highest probability of fixing this, because as it is right now, if you get treated for a brain aneurysm when you're partying in Las Vegas and you go back home to Minnesota, and the hospital in Las Vegas is not part of the same network as your hospital in Minnesota, and they're not using the same electronic health record software, your doctors are going to have a very hard time in Minnesota getting that information about what happened to you in your lost weekend over in Las Vegas. The current way that it's done, believe it or not, is through faxing.
Yes.
Now, for some of you youngins, faxing is a late 20th century technology, but it's never gone away. You know, it's like a photocopier that you can fax a document over. It's still quite popular within healthcare systems and medical offices. And faxing something over is not an efficient way of getting healthcare data done. If your doctor in Minnesota absolutely needs this information and he's scrambling around trying to contact the providers you had in Las Vegas, and then they tell you, well, we're going to fax it over to you. We'll try to get it to you by 5 p.m. Well, that may be okay, or it may actually be highly unfortunate for you if you're in a medical emergency. So I think that there's very good reasons that a company like Amazon, and I believe it's partnering with Apple, could transform the electronic health record space and give people access to all their health information in a sort of one-stop shopping experience. We should, as consumers, have access to this. So I think that the business case or the value add for this is quite clear. And the companies that are partnering to do this have resources that have really never been seen before in the history of the world. So yeah, quite possibly this is what's going to happen. I certainly think they'll probably do the security components better than what we've seen in the federal government's efforts of especially maybe the last 10 years, which are getting better over time, but very slowly. So Shanta, I hope that answered your question.
So I'm a realist when it comes to crime prevention and crime in general. Oh, and I've spent a significant part of my career in law enforcement dealing with street level crime. So you talked about using predictive analytics as a crime deterrent technique and some others. And Richard on the chat says an increasing number of medical centers are beginning to adopt more robust machine learning cybersecurity platforms like Splunk to attack this problem. Now, being a realist, I know that if you put bars on your windows and on your doors, if somebody wants to steal something bad enough, they're going to steal it. If somebody wants to commit the crime bad enough, it's probably going to happen. And that's just me being a realist. How much of a dent do you think these tools are going to put into the theft of health data?
Well, I think that the jury is still deciding on this stuff. It's just a little bit too new, and I think that if there's going to be success stories on this, we'll be hearing about them fairly quickly, because when healthcare organizations have a do it right story, look at us innovating and being pioneers in certain areas, they will tend to get the word out with their press releases. So far, I have not seen anybody claiming that machine learning is allowing them to predict cyber breaches better, but I think that's an active area of research. I think there's reasonable expectations that it's going to make incremental improvements. Now, does that justify the many millions of dollars that are going to get spent on this? We just don't know yet. So I think you should be modestly hopeful that all of the activity in predictive analytics and machine learning is going to have at least some payoff in helping hospitals, predict maybe, it could be the time of the month that they're the most vulnerable. That would be a very, very helpful information to know. If you knew, which days of the year, statistically speaking, you're most likely to get an advanced persistent threat that's actually targeting your organization specifically, you can calibrate your risk accordingly. So I have modest expectations that this stuff's going to get better with machine learning and predictive analytics.
So I appreciated your discussion earlier about upskilling. That's something that we're very interested in through National CyberWatch right now. And I would ask you, what are some of the areas that you see, some of the unique issues that you see that face the security of healthcare data that really need to be focused on in the training of the folks that are charged with securing that data?
Well, so if you had a well-trained security professional join a hospital or a healthcare organization, they're going to need significantly more upskilling to be able to do their jobs adequately because of the particularities of the healthcare verticals. So there's a lot of federal law around this stuff. I mean, we're talking about HIPAA particularly, where there's onerous consequences for data breaches beyond what you would see outside of the healthcare sector. So I guess it's the Office of Civil Rights, it's the one that initiates HIPAA audits. They can do so for any reason, or for almost no reason at all. They have a mandate to do audits, and they can make life very difficult for hospitals. So HIPAA compliance is the type of upskilling that a cybersecurity professional who joins a healthcare organization, they're gonna need to know about this stuff, or at least they should. So that's just one example. The fact that we're dealing with life and death situations ultimately makes cybersecurity for hospitals in the category of say, cybersecurity for emergency responders, for firemen, for utilities, for police, for military, and for those other occupations in which lives are at stake in a very direct sense. So it is a challenge to get people who are not only knowledgeable about information security, but also who are able to appreciate the contingencies associated with medicine and the fact that ultimately this is about taking care of people. So there's a lot of opportunities for any people in cybersecurity who want to get retrained in this space. I mean, hospitals need you. If for somebody who's thinking about doing this, you could really be doing something with your life where you'd be contributing to the great work. And we really need people. We need people who are healthcare people to be thinking about cybersecurity, and we need cybersecurity people to be thinking about healthcare and joining up any way they can. I think of this as being more than just something people could do for their jobs. I think this is something we should all think about as a mutual responsibility for keeping our society going in a healthy way.
All righty. So I don't see any further questions in chat. Owen, do you have any final words you'd like to leave us with?
I would just encourage anyone out there who has any different take on things to reach out to me. I value contrarian takes on controversies. I want to hear dissenting perspectives. Please tell me why I'm wrong. I very much would encourage anyone to reach out to me. I'm at neuronoid@rocketmail.com, and I'm also on LinkedIn, and would love to network with people and learn what you're working on and get some ideas. And I'm very available and very interested in getting other perspectives on this stuff, especially on what can be done, which I emphasize the negative aspects of this more than the we could do to make the situation better, and I'm very eager to hear people's ideas.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if you could go ahead and end your sharing on your end.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, and then I'm going to throw this back up so everybody can see that. So, Owen, thanks again for your outstanding and very informative presentation today. And thanks everyone for attending today. The webcast you've been watching is going to be available in the next few days on our YouTube channel. So keep an eye on that. And also Owen's PowerPoint slides will be available on our website at nationalcyberwatch.org. You can also get to our YouTube channel. If you go to the bottom of our homepage, you'll see a link to the YouTube channel. So thanks again, everybody, for visiting with us today. And we look forward to seeing all of you again in future webcasts. Have a great day.